Hi everybody, welcome to the fourth episode of the Sports Psych Sesh, bringing you the latest academic research and news in sports psychology in an easy and digestible way. Joined again by my partner in crime, Owen McNeil. Owen, would you like to introduce our guest?
Yeah, I'm delighted to introduce Chris Bryan. Chris is an elite Irish international distance swimmer, and he's also a positive psychology PhD student here in the University of Limerick. So, Chris, do you want to give us a little bit of your athletic background? So, we'll say how you got involved in the sport, kind of your history in the sport.
Yeah, again, it's swimming, and I started swimming from a very, very young age. My neighbour, Margaret Talty, was a swim teacher, so luckily I got in the water very, very early. Joined a swimming club when I was about 11 or 12, so late enough, but I've been swimming all the way up to there. Joined the first National Performance Centre here in University of Limerick when I was 16, and commuting an hour to training after schools. And at 18, I came to college here in UL, and I've been part of the Performance Centre since, training full time, where my pool swimming has progressed into a bit more distance and a bit more mileage, where I'm doing marathon swimming. So it's an Olympic event since 2008, where it's in seas, oceans, rivers, over a distance of 10 kilometres, and that's where I'm at now, and just focusing towards Rio.
Nice. So are there any sponsorships you want to share?
So at the moment I'm sponsored as well by Asystec Data Management, who are based here in Limerick, and they actually came to watch me in 2013, and when I came 16th in the World Championships, and they're very much deal with large companies, and they're there to, again, compete in that business league. When they noticed, when they saw me, that I'm not just there to compete to make up the numbers. And it's something that it's also spurred on my research, dealing with organisations, that same competitive strategy. And of course, from a sporting point of view, that sponsorship is so important with amateur athletes and trying to compete with the other bigger countries, and that's why it's great to have seeing them board with Summer Island Sports Council funding. And I'm always very appreciative of that.
And obviously, you've got a little bit of a sports psychology background. The fact that you're doing a PhD here in UL. Can you tell us how you got involved in sports psychology? Where did that interest come from?
Yeah, I suppose this is more about my journey and how my swimming's unfolded. Where I suppose when I look at myself, I'm someone who's never been the most talented, the biggest guy out there, and I've always had to utilise everything I've had. And my journey hasn't been an easy one, and even from a younger age, I'd say when I was 8 years old, there was one guy who was beating me every race. By the time I was 11, I'd beaten him, but there was someone new beating me every race. By the time I was 14, there was someone new, and I was constantly very much like a mastery mindset, where no matter what I tried to do, I wanted to see how good I could be, and that basically forced me to find sports psychology as, I suppose, my niche to something that not everybody else was doing at that time.
Okay, cool. And so can you expand on that a little bit and tell us how you use sports psychology in your, we'll say, day-to-day life, and also then in more detail in terms of in a competitive environment, without giving anything away that you wouldn't want your competitors to hear?
Yeah, 100%. So I suppose for myself, sports psychology is something that was really going to complement what I was doing, because it was very much something that really stood out that I could improve. And where I was someone who always would have been seen as one of the best trainers in there, where 2-hour training session, that was my turf. No one was going to beat me there. But a lot of times when I used to go to a race condition, I used to get really bad anxiety and nervous, and because I trained so hard, I'd be so worried about that one performance. I felt like it would define me, or if it didn't go well, all my training would kind of be for nothing. So I started trying to find ways to deal with that, and straight away it led me to things like mindfulness, positive self-talk, mantras, just getting perspective, dealing with negative thoughts. And I very much started to go down that way of learning and trying to find out more. I suppose the mindset maybe I had before I looked into sports psychology was a mindset where I was going up on the blocks, and I'd stand up there, and I'm very much a textbook overthinker.
Okay.
So for me, sports psychology really acts to help that. Where a lot of people, that comes very, very naturally. People like Usain Bolt would say, geez, I don't talk a lot to sports psychologists, but when you watch him and you go out there, and we'd all look at him and be like, wow, it's constant positive reinforcement, self-talk in the moment, out of his head. But for me, that's something that, it sounds funny, but it's a learned movement and motion.
Yeah.
an activity where, when I'm being almost textbook, is let's say I have a 200 freestyle. I know exactly what way I want to dive. I know what I want to do underwater. Every single stroke, I might be looking at a high elbow, a strong finish. But instead of just doing that, I literally am thinking, okay, make sure strong stroke, watch this turn, don't mess up, careful of the breakout, second half stronger. I'm wondering what I spit for that. And the whole race, I'm trying so hard to get everything right that I don't realize that, I'm visualizing in my head the whole time during the race. I'm not actually in the race. I'm not even in that moment. So for me, the biggest idea is just trying to get perspective on that. Trying to stop worrying about things and basically let your body do what it knows best.
Okay.
When I look at perspective now, is by the time I get up on that block to swim that race, the race is necessarily already swam. That result of that race is an outcome of all those weeks of hard training. All that pre-programming from those sessions, where every dive I've done in training is thinking about the race and how I'm going to execute that. The underwaters, every stroke, down to open water, the tactics, when am I going to make a push, what kind of training sets I do. It's all pre-programmed as I train day in, day out. So when I get up in that block, I'm excited. I'm not nervous about what's going to happen, because what's going to happen is going to happen. I'm able to get myself into that kind of superior psychological position. And that's something for me was very, very important, to try and enjoy racing and get perspective. Where, I meet a lot of people who do that naturally almost.
Yeah.
You can just see them, and I'm like, man, I wish that just came to me. But I suppose that's all our own struggles. We learn a lot from that, and that's kind of made me the individual I am.
Is there, so basically you got to a stage where you're able to trust the practice that you put in, you're able to trust your own hard work, your own dedication, to the point where you're minimizing the nerves basically as you get up on the blocks. Is there a different, is that situationally dependent? So, or would you have the same nerves, we'll say, or the same mindset approaching a big international competition like an Olympic Games or a national competition? Is it the same? Have you got the same mindset? Is it just the same approach every time?
Yeah, 100% it is. Like, if I'm going to any kind of race, I'd almost imagine that Olympic surrounding.
Okay.
I'm very much someone who puts a lot of pressure on myself almost every race, but almost every day in training, where I have small daily targets and goals that when I get into training, I know exactly what I need to hit to get where I need to be at this moment in time, because the Olympics is X many months away.
Okay.
So if I come in and I don't deliver that day, not that I haven't given it 100%, but it doesn't work out, I'm almost feeling that poor performance, not feeling great, trying to figure out what went wrong. So I'm constantly looking, trying to get perspective on that, which can be very much intense.
Yeah.
I know that's something, again, I've had to deal with, that, going up into London 2012, and then looking at now and trying to wonder, okay, well, what have I done different in 4 years? How am I a better swimmer than I was 4 years ago? And I think at this level it's quite hard to look back and see that. And I think it's also very, very important to look back and acknowledge that, to be aware. Because really in 4 years I haven't learned that much more about swimming. That's not the difference. But I'm in so much more a better place. And that's because I know so much more about myself, what works for me at that high level, that, trying to cater to the individual. And it's almost funny, it's not about that 30, 40 hours a week training, because, comparing it to 4 years ago, I haven't done that much different. But it's everything I do outside of that, which maximizes everything I do in that same 30, 40 hours. Because, necessarily everyone in the world is doing the same kind of training. There might be different kind of sets here and different bits of gym. But necessarily, when you get to the Olympic Games, there's going to be 25 guys who's trained their whole life, to swim this race. And it's very much what you do outside of that. So how do I maximize my training day in, day out? And from a psychological, nutritional, from a rest, from a well-being point of view. And for me, that's where this kind of life balance comes in. And you mentioned about my perspective and mindset when I, deal with, let's say, college and school and to do with sport. 100%, that's all ingrained. That's everything I'm doing. The biggest thing I've had to do is maybe categorize everything I want. Because as everybody else, I'd be, quite aspirational. Like, want to be the greatest researcher in the world. Want to be the greatest student in the world. Want to be the best son in the world. Want to be the best boyfriend in the world. You want it all, but it comes to a point where something's got to give. I remember coming out from London 2012 and looking back and saying, okay, in this past year, I literally have left, every stone unturned. I've done everything I can to get there. And I remember it was in 2011, I looked at the Olympics and knew how possible it was, and I was able to just almost shut everything out, go for broke. But if I had that same, ideology and philosophy going straight into 2013, I don't know what place I'll be in now. It's that management. Sometimes it's not sustainable. You know, I'm in a position now that I suppose if I went all out until Rio, I'd be okay. But win, lose, or draw, I'd be exhausted afterwards. Now I've got very, very good at balancing things, being resilient, learning about, you know, failure and setbacks as a process of success and how to deal with that. So that's the way I incorporate everything.
So if we talk about learning from setbacks, if we can take you back to 2012 and that you missed out on the London Games basically in a photo finish. So can you talk about, like, knowing you personally, I know that you bounced back from that extremely well, that you're an extremely resilient athlete, that you're in a better place now going into the Rio Games than you were going into London Games. Can you talk a little bit about the process of bouncing back from that and how you became a stronger athlete from that experience?
Yeah, again, I'm doing a lot of research on resilience, and one of the biggest things I keep re-acknowledging and then notice kind of differences in the literature is sometimes resilience is looked at an aspect of trying to stay positive, that resilience is about being positive, learn straight away, and, you know, just being able to bounce back as quick as possible. But in reality, you know, emotions are set in the pace constantly.
Yeah.
And resilience isn't just about trying to stay positive. Resilience is about dealing with negative. It's about being able to manage yourself, manage emotions, you know, and different periods of time. And it's okay, because when I went through London, I was, you know, rock bottom straight after when I heard I didn't qualify. You know, and that's okay, but it's how you utilize that. How long does it take to, you know, go through those cognitions and think about that process and what went well, what didn't go well, and try to get your head back on to deliver 100% day in, day out.
I think overcoming that kind of adversity is something that isn't really taught to our elite athletes as they go up through the age levels as well as it should. That there's too many elite athletes, I would say at junior level, I've seen it myself, where they get the first bump in the road where suddenly they're not winning gold at everything because they move up in age level, and they just don't know how to process overcoming that adversity. Would you agree with that? Would you agree that there's kind of, we need to improve how we teach young athletes coming through to deal with those kind of setbacks and how to become better athletes out of those setbacks?
Yeah, 100%. But, you know, we try to do what we can to teach athletes about those setbacks, but it's almost impossible because it's about learning from experience.
Yeah.
And as much as you can simulate experience, you've got to go through it. You know, I very much look at resilience as, you know, upwards and downward spirals.
Yeah.
I know there's a paper by Fredrickson talking about dealing with life's slings and arrows. And basically, you know, you're talking about, you know, when you're winning all the time and when you're in that flow and positive feedback and goals and winning, it spurs on more positive emotions, and you can become very, very resilient at being at the top like that. And as you said, I've seen athletes that, you know, qualified for the Olympics, have gone to the Olympic Games and, you know, hit nail on the head, go after go, and the minute they have one setback, they can't deal with it. The very, very sad outcome you see with that is when athletes just give up.
Yeah.
I think as practitioners, what you're there for is you're the guy that picks them back up, gives them perspectives, and dusts them off.
Yeah.
Because very much athletes aren't going to have that experience first off of being able to process these things, seeing the positive and just realizing, look, this is just part of the process. If you look at, you know, I think it's Sarkar and Fletcher 2014 look at high achievers, and they look at you know, not just in sport but in business, and they look at, you know, what makes high achievers achieve, and they all denote this certain, you know, setback or life-changing event that's made them who they are. And then if I want to talk a bit more, I suppose, about resilience.
Yeah.
You know, when you're talking about these major life events, but we also want to look at resilience as a day-to-day concept, that it's a process that, you know, we have a certain level that is constantly changing, constant dynamic, you know, depending on who you meet, the interactions, daily stressors, hassles, you know, constant feedback about your performance and peers and comparisons. Like the concept of resilience came from child psychology, and it was a woman called Emmy Werner, and she basically looked at kids, babies who were born in an island near Hawaii, and followed them for 30 years, and looked at basically families who were in high risk or if they weren't, and then looked at the kids who were in high risk, and they tried to predict mental illness. And this is where it came out 30 years later. Children with high risk to mental illness found out they were basically this magical resilience, that they became full, well-rounded people, a third of those high-risk children, and that they were able to utilize those negative experiences to learn and to get an advantage over other children. And this is where this whole concept emerged, and I suppose that's where we get this whole idea that resilience is a characteristic trait, but it's not. Maybe you could say it's trait-like or state-like, but it's very much a learned process. Again, I know I'm talking a little bit,
perfect,
but it's something that I familiarize myself a lot with, and again, I'm researching resilience a lot to do with myself, because as a thinker, and as we're all thinkers here as sports psychologists, and as I'm dealing with sport day in day out, I've trained against Olympic medalists, Olympic champions, and I'm in the pool beside them trying to wonder, okay, well, what's got me here today from a small county in the island of Ireland, where I didn't join a real performance set up till I was 16. What's made me a high achiever, and how have I got there? As I stare at the 6'8" Olympic champion, and be like, wow, I could do with those arms. But what I look at is that day-to-day resilience. That I'm not someone who's the most talented, but I can work hard, and not just work hard today or for a week or for a month, but constantly showing that consistency of showing month after month of quality training. And that's not just blowing out, and you talk about guys who turn out getting sick in the field and they've had the hardest training session ever. I'm almost smart enough where there might be one session a week where I push myself to that extent, and I push myself to that boundary, and then I get back in the next day and I'm able to deal with that. Resilience isn't about, let's say in rugby, you get up to hit a penalty kick and it's the last minute of the match, win or draw. That is resilience, to step up and be able to hold your nerve. But let's say you miss that kick, and 2 days later, Monday morning, you're back with the team in the gym. How does your work effort change from those two scenarios, whether you made the kick or you didn't?
It's overcoming the adversity is where resilience really
it's
kicks
been able
in,
to get yourself in a psychological position to put in that, I suppose you'd call it discretionary effort. Discretionary effort is that idea of going above and beyond the job description. So even if you're looking at a day-to-day work environment, or look at the bin man, he comes, collects your bins, empties them, and maybe every now and again one of the bins, the rubbish falls on the floor. One day he'll pick that up and throw it in the garbage truck. Another day he'll be like, not for me today, not feeling it. What's his thought process? What position is he in from that first day to the second? Why does he go above and beyond? And that's kind of what I look at, and that's what I think I'm able to do better than anyone else in the world. No matter how I'm feeling, I'm able to find a way to get that work in, over a year, over 2 years.
That's brilliant. You are a PhD student here in positive psychology. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what you're researching and kind of why you're researching it?
Okay, so as I mentioned before, I focus mostly on resilience, and I look at that resilience process, trying to maximize effort day to day. And I'm looking at a goal-oriented behavior and in working towards aspirations. So looking at academia, business, organizations, and sport. And I'm looking at sustainable high-performance environments. And not just in elite achievers. I'm also looking at employees, younger athletes, and just trying to look at how to develop those key attributes towards that resilience. Building and broaden and building those psychological resources, try and maximize work effort day in, day out, learn from setbacks. I suppose I look a lot at the conservation of resources series, where you think about as many resources you can build, the more you're going to invest in getting more resources, so putting yourself in a more vulnerable position. So from that point of view, I know a lot of athletes, a lot of people talk about that table and those different legs. If you're looking at psychological resources, you look at those legs.
Discussed that in episode 2 with Bernard.
So it's very, very similar. And the way I look at it, I suppose, is when you're trying to build an identity and a broader identity. So again, I think Bernard did talk about not just looking at himself as an athlete, but looking at himself as a performing individual. And I think that's something that I very much apply to myself, and especially academics as well, that same work ethic, that same ideology. And I think, when you're coming into work every day, it's very, very important, as opposed to say, you have other things in your life. So what you find is people tend to invest more effort, and employees decide to invest more effort when, let's say, they have a higher pay, which you think, okay, that makes a lot more sense, but they're more financially secure, they're not worried about these things. When their family life is going better, when they have hobbies and they're also doing sport, when you get a bunch of different things that don't define you. So let's say you get a bad report in work and you want to figure out how to get better. If you're not very resilient, you won't search for that feedback. you'll use an avoidance strategy. Whereas let's say if, you've had a great morning, things are going great with your family, and you also had a great round of golf at the weekend, and you're comfortable about your ability, you wouldn't mind, going to the boss, looking for feedback, because it's that whole point of view that negative feedback would have so much more of an impact than, let's say, a small positive one. So we're looking at trying to stack the odds in our favor to be in a strong psychological position to learn from those failures, to be in a position not to avoid those setbacks, but to learn from them.
So do you think then, can you talk to us a little bit about the overlap between, let's say, organizational or work psychology and sports psychology? Do you think that some of the constructs we use in sports psychology are very applicable to the organizational workplace then?
Yeah, very much so. Again, I'm just looking at sustainable performance environments. And, you look at sport and, we compare badminton to swimming to the high jump, which are very much completely different skills and completely different training, and you find completely different people that apply themselves to these skills. And what keeps coming up from a psychological perspective are these exact same things we talk about, that deliberate practice, those 10,000 hours. It's just trying to figure out, well, how do you get that meaningful deliberate practice in? Yeah. How do you get to that point and put in that meaningful practice day after day? Same in a business. Majority of businesses, you got to learn on your feet. You got to put yourself, out of your comfort zone to learn and to maximize that, to arrive every day. And it's that, unpredictable performance environment that, we're in the real world. It's dynamic. We can't predict things. We just set ourselves up and we see how the world responds, and then we try and adapt, be flexible, and learn from that, and pat ourselves in the back and get back out there. And if you talk about it, any successful entrepreneur, that they've had huge company busts, and when they've hit rock bottom and they've found a way to get back up and learn from that, and all the best have. It's very, very same when you look at athletes. Even in academics, same idea, trying to get yourself in a position to put in a lot of work, and it's competitive. Underneath everyone's shirts and ties, we all have tracksuits on. We're all at the start line, we're all competing for papers, for our own little niche.
Yeah.
It's a very, very similar mindset, and there are differences, but with those same kind of mindset. And what I look at as well is those kind of athletes' career transitions. That very much athletes do see themselves as, rugby players have career-ending injuries, and they think, well, all I can do is play rugby. But they've been, I almost look at myself as a miniature organisation. And I very much, just local departments and branches who I deal with to improve the company, which are my coaches, my nutritionists, my physio. And then I have, business partners who would be the media, sponsors, Sports Council, Swim Ireland.
Yeah.
And it's how I'm able to manage those relationships, be able to maximize them, manage myself, as well as investing every single day towards my company, towards the same goal and the same philosophy. And it's very much applicable. You're working in a team atmosphere all your life, where someone who's gone straight through school, maybe got all A's, came into college, finished with a 1-1 degree, and the only teamwork they've done is in small presentations in college. Yeah. It's that real life experience of not finding answers in a book, because that's the thing, the answers aren't in the book. So You've got to be able to take it on the chin. Even if you've got 1-1s all your life, there's going to be some guy in business, no matter how good you are, just won't like your style, and that's life.
Yeah. And
it's trying to be able to maximize and learn and deal with that. I think sport is a great kind of natural lab, I think, for studies, and especially for organizations and businesses to look at, where we're able to simulate that. We're able to simulate that pressure and those pressure environments when we're direct head-to-heads, and there's highs and lows, and that unpredictable environment where if you're in high training, you can hop into a really hard race and really, really feel that. Let's say we were trying to stimulate the same sort of stress in a business. Maybe we're going to have to, get the employee to drive 2-3 hours of traffic before work, but you're going to straight away affect their work productivity.
Yeah.
So you can't do that. So that's why I think that there's great areas to look through the lens of sport and business, the same idea. And you can learn from both contexts and, share ideas. And very much from what I've found so far is they're very comparable.
Yeah, I would imagine your research in organizational psychology has helped your athletic performance just as much as your athletic background has helped your research targets as well.
Yeah, 100%. To just kind of complement each other. And I suppose it's just a way of constantly trying to look at things differently. It's very, very hard to get perspective, when you're buried in the middle of something. I always love the ideology is the last person to, realised that water existed with a fish. Because when you're immersed in it, you just don't see that perspective from the outside. And I find we get very carried away in our own little world sometimes of even research, because you're researching the same thing the whole time. That looking at, similar ideas in different domains, I think could be quite a refreshing way and a viewpoint.
So you were talking a little bit earlier about tactics. Can you talk a little bit, because open water swimming is different than pool swimming in that there aren't lanes to divide you. It's you kind of have to position yourself. Can you talk a little bit about the uniqueness, especially in different cold water environments, warm water, things like that?
Yeah. Open water is quite different. Even swimming is quite different. And I suppose I've always enjoyed the crazed look of people's faces when you say, I've been up since 4:30 and 6 morning a week and back again in the evening. And then when I go on to tell them that I do 10 kilometres swimming, the jaw drops a little bit further. And then when I elaborate that I don't go into the pool, that I decide to go into the sea, into rivers, then I can see them feeling a bit faint. And as much as I enjoy that approach, I actually really, really enjoy that type of environment.
It's a challenge.
Where that's exactly, it's just that buzz of the challenge. And it is very, very much to pool swimming, where you have heats, semis and finals, and throughout a weekend you could have 2 or 3 different races, and there's very much a different mental approach to stepping up and dealing with those performances and getting back up for the next race, and just managing yourself over those few days. Whereas for me, I have this one massive event that we all build up to. There's almost that pre-race talk the whole time, and before we get in, and before we get into the chaos, because you really are in there. And as much as people can think it's very, very hard, the biggest question I suppose I always get is, geez, do you not get bored 10 kilometers of swimming? And honestly, it's so much more exciting than 1500 meters swimming or pool racing, because there's just so much going on. And if you talk to any endurance athlete and they say you're looking to recall any race, you can only remember 1 or 2 things, because very much you're in that moment the whole time. So I'm dealing with where it's like a pack, it's very much a peloton in cycling, where we're dealing with tactics. You're constantly positioning yourself, wondering where to feed, but then there's arms flying, there's waves going on, you're trying to stay on the right course, wondering when to take on energy drinks at the right times, and you're thinking and planning and plotting all the time, as you're battling the conditions. And as much as I love that man versus nature approach, it's also very much a race. If you look at the pool, everyone in there is separated by lanes. And that's where you can almost, I know a lot of people do visualization where curtains either side of the lane when they get intimidated competitors and just pretend nobody's there. If I did that, I'm going to get killed, because I'm going to be swimming into people. It's very much in there, in the moment, and you're on top of each other, and you're racing head to head, stroke to stroke, on each other's hips and shoulders. And as much as it's madness, I thrive in that kind of chaos. And, it's that kind of dynamic environment that we talk about the whole time, but very much a pressure situation. And I really, really enjoy it, but it is very different. And 10K is the Olympic distance, but I also swam 25K, 9th in Europeans, and 2014, which is, again, slightly different, but just as gruesome. But it's kind of where I found my niche, and I think that's where everyone turns out finding their niche. If I could be a sprinter and in the gym every second day instead of getting up early, I'd be okay with that. But I really found my niche in the open water.
Speaking of gruesome, are there ever any errant arms or nails underground jockeying, underwater jockeying for position?
Oh, 100%, yeah. Like around so it's not a 10K straight, it would be laps of 2K or laps of 1.6K. And you can imagine, let's say there's an 80-man field, and around each turning buoy, so there's a big buoy in the middle of the ocean, and as the pack approaches, the quickest line is that one-person line around the inside of the buoy. So every single turning buoy, there could be 5 every lap, every 2K, becomes a bottleneck. And, inevitably, it's the person who has, the big enough to go and take that line and take the couple of hits, maybe get stuck underwater for a couple of seconds. But look, you check our nails beforehand. Actually, the women are known to be much, much more vicious than the men. What I like is almost the camaraderie of it all, because as much of it's hard, we're all experiencing the same thing. Whether you come first or whether you come last, we're all experiencing that 10K race, depending on what the environment is. And as much as there's a huge build-up and it's tough when we're in there, everyone's very open when we finish. And open about the race and how they felt, and have a really good chat. And you can really see camaraderie within the sport that sometimes I've just never really seen in the pool, which I think is quite interesting.
Well, on that note, Chris, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Anybody have any parting thoughts they'd like to share?
Just, I suppose, it's thanks very much, Chris, for we know it's very busy and putting aside his time to do the podcast for us. And best of luck for the rest of the year and for Rio in 2016.
Thanks very much, and best of luck with the podcast, boys.
Thank you. Owen, would you like to do the share, like, subscribe part?
Yeah, so if everybody could share, like, rate and subscribe on our various social media, so the YouTube in particular, if you could subscribe there, and our Twitter is at sportspsychsesh, and same on our Facebook is at sportspsychsesh, and then our website is sportspsychsesh@blogspot.ie.
Great. Well, thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.